Fortunate today to have President Gitanas Nausėda, the President of the Republic of Lithuania. Thank you. We've just heard from Minister Pistorius, of course, and then we have the Secretary of the Committee on National Defense and Armed Forces, Natalia Pouzyreff. Thank you for being here, ma'am. Madame. Many of you may be wondering, Minister Healy, the British Defense Minister, was actually scheduled to be here. He had a scheduling issue or a transportation issue getting here, which means for me, you each get probably one or even two more questions, since I don't have him up here, so any complaints about that can go right to GCHQ. When the wonderful conference organizers came to me, first approached about a panel discussing whether Europe would have to accept more security responsibility several weeks ago, it seemed almost theoretical at the time, or at a minimum, it was a longer-term evolution of change in security in Europe. But just this week alone, it has become much more of an immediate reality. So I do want to start with that. Mr. President, Germany, as we heard from the minister, is planning to station 5,000 more soldiers, a combat brigade in Lithuania as a permanent presence by 2027. Do you see the comments that we're getting out of the United States right now, including possibly eliminating the European Defense Initiative and openly discussing pulling back the security presence here in Europe? Are you concerned that the US support for NATO has shifted from a tangible, visible presence to more of a commitment that's more words than action?
I am in really a very tricky situation because I am representing the country which is probably one of the most transatlantically enthusiastic, and we all the time supported this transatlantic bond as one of the key pillars of European security. Yes, we receive a lot of signals which might be confusing for us, which might raise some questions about the future, about the perspectives. But probably right now it would be too premature to draw the conclusions and to say that we have to face new reality, we have to restructure, to regroup, to rethink ourselves and probably go another way. NATO is a very strong organization. NATO used to be a very strong organization during the very long period of Cold War. Why? Because it was determined, it was really ready to fight back, ready to retaliate, and this created certain balance between the former Soviet Union and NATO. I think we should create a strong NATO organization, but first of all, we have to deliver on our promises. And if we are talking that we have to take more responsibilities, I am thinking about the summit of NATO in Wales. There was a promise to invest 2% of our GDP 11 years ago. What happened in Vilnius? Vilnius summit, we were hosting in Vilnius NATO summit in 2023. There was the promise to spend on defense, yes, again 2%, but the 2% as a floor of investment. And now we are talking, approaching The Hague, we are talking about 3% spending. But the situation is totally different. Average spending of NATO countries is 1.9% of GDP. Despite long discussions, despite nice plans, we are still below threshold of 2%. In this situation, I think we have to be honest to ourselves and to do much more. And I'm talking not only about defense spending, but I am talking about support to Ukraine and other issues. My country is ready to do what is needed, and recently we have announced that the defense spending in 2026, 2030 should reach the level of 5 to 6% of GDP. This is really pretty high figure, and we will be putting a lot of efforts in order to achieve this level. Another important element of Eastern flank countries, and especially Baltic countries, close cooperation with our friends. And I really have to say that Mr. Boris Pistorius, the Minister of Defense of Germany, is a person who was very emotionally engaged into this project. And probably you, dear Minister, were the person who was truly believing to the success of this project from the very beginning. And now this is a matter of our honor to do the rest, to deliver on our promises, to implement all the measures which are necessary for full accommodation, training of a German brigade. And we are sure that we will be able to deliver. I see the defense minister of Lithuania, and she agrees with me. So I think this is a good guarantee that we will proceed. But coming back to your question, I think we have to take more responsibility. We have to deliver more. We have to require from ourselves much more than we did in the past. And we should use all the possibilities not to lose the transatlantic bond. I still strongly believe in the transatlantic bond, but of course we have to closely work with our partners, United States, and this is our duty to do.
It's generally a good idea to agree with the president for job security, just so you know. Smart. Because the president brought up money, Mr. Minister, I want to ask you about that. I believe Germany reported to NATO spending about 90.6 billion euros in defense spending in 2024, but about 20 billion of that was from the special fund. That met the 2% threshold for Germany, but if I understand it correctly, the special fund may not be around for much longer. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a journalist. Math is not my strong suit, clearly. But is it even possible, now that this discussion of 5%, I mean, that's becoming more mainstream, or at a minimum 3%. Is it even possible for Germany to meet that?
From my perspective, it's not the question whether it is possible or not, or achievable. It has to be. There's no doubt about not a question of whether, but of when and how quickly. Because, I mean, we can discuss about 5%. I don't care. Sorry to say that, because my primarily focus is to achieve the NATO capability requirements which we have to face in summer. And the head of states will then conclude. This is the challenge we have to fulfill, and to do that in between the years we get for that. And that might cost in 1 year 100 billion in Germany, and the next year 120, and the next 90. I don't care. We have to make it possible. We have to make it happen. And therefore, I'm quite convinced, and I mentioned it earlier, we have to understand, we need to understand in Europe and in Germany too, that security is absolutely crucial. Without security, anything else is nothing. If we don't acknowledge that investments in security is investment in our future before we can discuss anything else, then we make a severe mistake for our children and grandchildren. And therefore, and I know very well it is a challenge for every society, to be honest. I mean, we are now spending, you named the number, in 2028 the special fund will be spent totally. Then we go back, if nothing happens, to 52, 53 billion euros a year, which means something about 1.3 or something like that. So the next government coming in office after the elections, Sunday 23rd, anytime, the first challenge it will have to face is to solve that issue. How do we manage the budget for 28 and follows? Because we need at least 85 to 90 billion euros in 28 for achieving 2%. To achieve 3% would mean 120 billion, 130 billion, which would mean, compared with today, with a regular budget of my ministry, more than 70 billion euros more. So it has to come from anywhere. And I don't believe it is possible to cut that out of the regular budget. Social welfare, healthy system, infrastructure. It is impossible. Then we will have a division of our societies, and the only ones who will benefit of that will be the far right and populist parties. And that will damage our democracies. And therefore it is so crucial to acknowledge that finally we have to do more as quickly as possible.
Madame, I want to ask you about the French military and support for Ukraine. They've already been training Ukrainian troops for some time now. We heard from the US Defense Secretary this week saying that he believes if peacekeepers go to Ukraine, if there is some sort of a peace deal or a ceasefire, they should not be under NATO and they should not have Article 5 protection. Do you believe that France should send peacekeepers if there is an agreement, a peace agreement, and should they have Article 5 protections?
Yes, it's working. Thank you. First, I wanted to thank Minister Pistorius for his words, because if we have to compare the freedom of speech in Europe, I think it's better than in Russia. Yeah, much better. So coming to the question, yes, it's again a question, a matter of political will. And we often refer to the coalition of the willing and the capable, and this is part of the European Constitution treaty. So, of course, the threat is not perceived the same way by different countries, but I think we more or less all agree that Russia is a long-lasting threat. It's even existential to some countries, like the Baltic countries. I think Russia has a plan. It will start by Moldova or Georgia, but it can, penetrate even Europe. So we are really in danger, and the manipulation of information is part of the risk we have to face, because it can jeopardize our democracies. We have seen it in Romania recently. So coming back to what the coalition of willing and capable could do, because I don't see France going on its own for sure, so we need to have partners, and there are partners I know that are well prepared. We have within the Weimar Triangle, plus, I would say, and plus the UK, plus other partners. Of course, we should get some insurances, guarantees that there's a good, say, air cover, air transportation facilities. There are some solutions that I'm not able to discuss now, but you cannot send troops, even if our military are completely professional militaries, and they will do what they are tasked for. But of course, it's not that easy. The thing is that because of the threat, we have to give security guarantees to Ukraine. And if there's a way that European can make it on a way or another, securing the border, providing more equipment, of course, we shall consider it, and we have certainly, on the other hand, to ramp up our industrial capabilities. This is what we are doing in France, trying to produce more munitions, missiles, and so on. On the third point is really we have to invest in R&D, because there will be a huge transformation of the combat on the ground. I think we'll use more AI, as it was said, quantum computing, to speed up the process, so that we can have this kind of collaborative combat, using drones and everything, and it will need a lot of investment in these technologies. And this is where we have to prepare for the future. We have really to take our responsibility, because it's for the next generation. We have to prepare for the skills It's not only about, producing equipment. We need to have the competencies, the skills. We need to have the engineers. We have to have the technicians. They should not go abroad to be able to work on AI and so on. So this was part of also your remarks. So maybe I will stop there.
Great. I promised I would take audience questions if you have something that's burning. Here, grab my mic. I feel like Oprah. I'm walking into the crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alexei Goncharenko, member of the Parliament of Ukraine. My question is, striking speech of Vice President Vance. He was very critical towards Europe, not so critical towards Russia. And he didn't mention Russia and Russian war against Ukraine almost at all. And so my question is, yesterday I heard from Pete Hegseth, new Secretary of Defense, that Uncle Sam will never be Uncle Sucker. And I completely agree, but also Uncle Sam should never be Uncle Shame, So that is important. And my question is, what will be done by Europe in order in 1 year not to listen to speech like this? Thank you.
Maybe you should address that question to another place. I don't know. I mean, what should I do? I mean, we admit all the time that the critics are right, that we have to do more and that we did too little in the years before. Much too little, to be honest. 2% is not enough, everybody knows it, and up to date, the President mentioned it earlier, not even all countries in NATO members in Europe have already achieved the 2%. And it's a challenge, as I mentioned too. So we don't disagree. And I even, when I talked to Pete Hegseth yesterday, I said to him, I fully agree that you will shift your focus more from Europe to the Indo-Pacific. And together we need to shift more focus, more attention to the Arctic too at the same time. So to expect from European side that the US will engage as much as in the past, in the future too, while at the same time doing more in Indo-Pacific and Arctic would be naive. And we have to take that responsibility. So therefore, acting is better than words in that place. If we do that, I don't know what's happened. And I don't know whether we will have to listen to a speech like that again. But anyway, it's better to have a hot heart and a cool head than the other way around.
Can I ask you, just since you mentioned that you were with Secretary Hegseth yesterday, this week, what did you think when he said that the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement?
Well, it's no secret what I think about that. I emphasized it already several times. I'm not the world's most important and famous deal maker. But if I were, I would know that I don't take any essential point of negotiations off the table before the negotiations begin. I would never do that. And
Did it damage Ukraine's standing? to all?
I don't know whether it damaged anything or not, but it makes it much more complicated and difficult. And afterwards, I heard some news from Washington, Wall Street Journal, and others that might be the final position. So what we experience in the moment is like we have in German the nice word like cacophony, multiple voices all over the world, and maybe we should step back a little bit and wait until all the noises get lower.
Please, sir.
I would like to comment a bit on you mentioned in your initial speech about the quick deal or a quick peace in Ukraine, and is closely related to your question. I think this is very dangerous idea to achieve the quick peace in Ukraine, and I have discussed this issue today with the President Zelensky. Ukraine will never take such quick peace at any cost. And we are talking about territorial sovereignty and integrity of the country, which is suffering, which is, of course, fighting back, and which is trying to survive. And in this situation, we have to put Ukraine in the position of strength. Right now, Russia feels to be on the stronger side and tries to dictate the conditions. In this situation, we have to negotiate tough, and we have to be at the table of negotiations, because a lot was said about the role of Europe before the war end and after the war end, and the responsibilities of Europe are very high and very important. So without Europe, I cannot imagine any negotiation process. And of course, it would be really misunderstanding if the negotiations will take place without Ukraine itself, because Ukraine is fighting, and Ukraine is really putting a lot of efforts to withstand this enormous pressure of Russian Federation. And we have to be very strongly on the side of Ukraine. So our deliveries are not only the deliveries to ourselves, our responsibilities, our homework to do, but we have to deliver on our promises to Ukraine. And unfortunately, I have to say, and I have to admit that not in all cases we are able to deliver. We heard so many declarations during the last 3 years. And if we calculate closely what those declarations, which declarations were fulfilled, the result is not very encouraging, unfortunately. My country, Nordic countries, Germany, other countries, were strong enough to deliver and keep the promises. This is very important, especially in this stage of the war.
Yes, very quickly. Some American fellow congressmen said that Donald Trump would strike a strong deal. So just let it be. Let's hope it will be a strong deal, and that it will imply that the Europeans will be involved in the negotiation along with the Ukrainians, of course.
I do want to take a question from one of our Munich young leaders.
Hi, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to very much thank you, Minister, for what you said on European democracy at the beginning of your speech. I think you captured the feeling of many people in the room, so I just wanted to thank you for this. My question is My question is the following. It's on security guarantees, because we discussed about increasing the responsibilities of Europe in defense in the midterm, but this question may come earlier. So my question is the following. How concretely can European countries play a strong role into providing such guarantees that would ensure a lasting peace in Ukraine and prevent further aggression by Russia? And as a sub-question, what could be, would be, should be the role of the US in this respect, also in light of the recent statements we've heard, and you referred to it, by Pete Hegseth in the past few days?
I would like, if you don't mind, to put that in the order of what is coming up. I mean, the first step was a phone call between President Trump and President Putin Wednesday at lunchtime, I think. Nothing happened since then, as far as I'm informed, except correcting the first decision that Ukraine is will now be at the table anyway. It's a good correction of what they said before. But we have to wait what's going to happen now, because if European countries, I don't want to name it, 5 or 7 or European Union or whatever, but if no European participation is guaranteed and is achieved in that process of negotiations, it's hard to imagine that Europe will then afterwards have the responsibility to achieve the guarantees. I mean, this is quite crazy. So it is about negotiating together with Ukraine, Russia, and the US, of course. And Pete Hegseth said yesterday there will be no US boots on the ground in Ukraine, and the European allies has to achieve that on their own. And I said to him quite frankly and publicly that we have to acknowledge and realize that we have a gap of deterrence capabilities in the European among the European NATO members. That means without the US deterrence capabilities, we won't be able to achieve that security guarantees in Ukraine, at least for the next years to come, not alone. So that's the same challenge we have with NATO and doing less by the Americans in the years to come. In both cases, we need a roadmap. We need a concept which we work on together, hand in hand, and which we go alongside, step by step together. Then everything is thinkable for the future, but not for the short-term future.
Yes, I would like to come back to the fact that I said earlier that Putin has a plan. His plan is to demilitarize Ukraine, to make it neutral, to get rid of Zelensky, to put a man in place, and not to allow any NATO, of course, but any European troops in Ukraine. So we are far from, a negotiation that can deliver what we think it could be. But of course, we are at this defining moment of, thinking about a possible resolution. But we are far, far from it.
Therefore, I'm so, cautious to speculate about what we might do in a couple of years. I don't take part in those discussions, at least not publicly.
We only have about 2 minutes left, and I have 12 pages of questions left.
Okay,
so
let's exceed.
I'm going to, yes.
It's my
unless we have
fault.
3 more hours, I'm going to do a quick lightning round with all of you. First, the speech by Vice President J.D. Vance today. Yes or no? Did you expect that he would come up here and criticize Europe for the need for more free speech and democracy? Madame, I'll start with you.
Very quickly. I thought he would speak at least about Ukraine and Russia. I could not believe he would speak about the freedom of speech in Europe and point out, Germany and UK. Of course, he would not mention France because it's better not to mention France. But it's
Why?
not my... But no, for me, it was unexpected.
Mr. Minister, I think we heard your feelings, but
yes,
were you?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I exceeded my speech, so please, Mr. President.
Mr. President, did you expect to hear that from the Vice President today?
First of all, I would like to expect that we come to the table, we discuss all the issues honestly, frankly, as friends do. And even probably right now it does not look like this, but I remember 2019, London, summit of NATO. The conversations were not very polite at that time also, between Donald Trump, between former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. But at the end of the day, we managed to take very important decisions in London and afterwards. So let me hope that we still have the potential to cooperate together, because everything is at stake. And right now we don't have the right to make the mistakes. And one of the cruelest mistakes would be just to abolish our transatlantic bond with United States. I know that I am unpopular here, talking about strong transatlantic bond. No, but believe me, it's very important for the Baltic states, which currently host 1,000 American soldiers, battalion on the persistent basis. We are hosting them beside German soldiers. So we rely heavily on our friends, all our friends, not trying to emphasize one of them.
You are not unpopular at all with that statement. Not at all.
No one's ever going to say you're unpopular when you're on stage, Okay, we're totally out of time, but I'm going to ask really a yes or no question for all of you. President Trump has talked about having closer relations with Vladimir Putin. Yes or no? Does that concern you going forward? Just a yes or no?
Well, it's a concern, for sure. And it's the first step to normalization of Putin that has happened, already taken place.
I mean, the experience we made in Europe with Vladimir Putin is quite clear. we could never trust him, and we won't be ever able to trust him. So we have to be very careful what we do, and still it's of course better to talk and to negotiate than to do not.
I fully agree with Minister, because you cannot trust Vladimir Putin. We have so long experience in communicating and having the relations with Russian Federation, and you cannot trust. But switching back to your question, I think this is very important to understand that, yes, as a first stage, these discussions are okay, but in the second stage, we need the involvement of Europe, involvement of Ukraine, most importantly. Ukraine is a critical part of these negotiations, because otherwise I cannot understand what is going on.
Thank you all so much. We have to leave it there. It was a fascinating discussion. Thank you to the Munich Security Conference.